Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. Namaste. So today we begin a new chapter, chapter 23, the double soul in man. Would you like to give us a little recap first? So,
Just to remind you the context, Surendra is examining mind, life, and finally he will examine also matter. He is going the opposite way, mind, life, and matter. He is establishing the connection between the lower hemisphere and the higher hemisphere. If he can't establish that connection, then his contention that a divine life on earth is possible will not stand. So he is busy doing that. He has done that with mind and supermind. Now he is discussing life. 4 or 5 chapters. Life, death, desire, incapacity, ascent of life, problem of life. The last one, double soul in man. So this is what he is doing. Then he will go to matter, another 3-4 chapters on matter, and show that matter is linked to Sat. That's what he is doing. That's in very small gist. Then last time he discussed the problem of life. The problem of life is, he says there are 3 difficulties which matter is a great obstruction to spiritual life. The first law is ignorance, total ignorance. The second is mechanical law. There is a law that operates and nothing can go outside that law. You have to stick to the laws in the physical world. That's why physics is possible. The science of physics is possible because there is a law. Nothing can go outside that law. I can predict if I am a scientist, an eclipse, 100 years from now also I can accurately, because there is a law that operates. Fixity. The third is division. These are the 3 difficulties of matter. It is a big hindrance to spiritual life. Now he comes to the double soul in man. Before we start this chapter on double soul, there is a double for mind, there is a double for vital, there is a double also for the body. As we have already discussed, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. Whatever is there in the universe, we have that in us. There is a subconscient, there is an inconscient, there is an intraconscient, and there is a superconscient. Superconscient also, there are many, many planes. Okay, so just to remind you, because it's very useful to have that image. If you think of yourself as a house, your subconscient is a cellar. All the rubbish things which you don't need goes into the cellar. Actually, it's not rubbish. Everything that happens in your life is stored there, whether you know it or not. It can be recovered also. Then there is the inconscient, which is even more down. That's your foundation, perhaps, of the building. When you go into your inside, into your intraconscient, at the back of your plot, you have the open sky to you. The building doesn't go up to that much. You're open to the sky. The suggestion is that when you go into your intraconscient, you are in touch with the cosmic forces. And whatever is there in the cosmos, you can access that. This is the principle of hypnotism. In hypnotism, the hypnotizer makes the hypnotized go into his intraconscient, and there he asks him questions and directs him, and he can find out things. This is one. Then there is a superconscient. It's like a terrace. You go to the terrace, and maybe there are 7 floors, 8 floors, higher mind, lower mind, and those floors have not yet been built in you, but you have the capacity to build them by yoga. So keep this in mind, because now I am coming to the double soul. There is an inner mind in the intraconscient. There is a subtle mind, which is 10 times more powerful than our ordinary mind. Similarly, there is a inner vital also. Behind the inner vital is a psychic being. Sri Aurobindo often identifies Amal's poems by saying this is coming from the inner vital. Then he says some things come from the subtle vital. Subtle physical. The subtle physical also a reproduction of the physical world, but in a much, much subtler way. And those who have experienced that, they say that the colors and the sharpness, brightness, everything increases tenfold when you go into your subtle physical. So this is, the double soul is behind all these principles of the inner mind, inner vital, inner physical. That's a double soul.
And on what plane are the Akashic records?
On what plane?
The Akashic records.
Oh, Oh, that is Akashic record means when you go into your higher levels.
It's not the intraconscious.
Yes, even in the interconscious, yes.
Okay.
When he was doing sadhana, Sri Aurobindo used to get quotations and all that from the Vedas, and he used to see them. In the beginning, it was not very clear. Slowly, slowly, he started becoming clearer and clearer. He used to see these guidance he used to get from the Vedas. That's what he's talking of, the Akashic records. We start the chapter.
4 Upanishad quotes.
Yeah. From the Katha and the Isha and the Taittiriya, all are Upanishads. The double soul in man. The Purusha, the inner self, no larger than the size of a man's thumb. That's a psychic being.
So he used that in Savitri.
Yes.
Ah.
Because it's from the Katha Upanishad. I think another Upanishad also there is a reference to the Angushtamatra Purusha. Yeah. In fact, it is written there, Shvetashvatara. Okay. He who knows this self, who is the eater of the honey of existence and the lord of what is and shall be, has thenceforward no shrinking. When you experience the self, everything becomes honey of existence. He is using the word. He is not using, he is translating. Eater of the honey of existence. Because when you get the psychic experience, everything becomes beautifully full of love and joy. Love, joy, beauty. These things are what you experience. Whence shall he have grief? Who shall be deluded? How shall he be deluded who sees everywhere the oneness? Actually, this refers more to the self than the psychic being. This refers more to the self because you see everywhere oneness. There is nothing else apart from you. So you can neither have grief nor any fear because nothing else is there except you. He who has found the bliss of the eternal has no fear from any quarter. The first status of life we found to be characterized by a dumb, inconscient drive or urge, a force of some involved will in the material or atomic existence, not free and possessor of itself or its works or its results, but entirely possessed by the universal movement in which it arises as the obscure, unformed seed of individuality. The root of the second status is desire, eager to possess, but limited in capacity. The bud of the third is love, which seeks both to possess and be possessed, to receive and to give itself. The fine flower of the fourth, its sign of perfection, we conceive as the pure and full emergence of the original will, the illumined fulfillment of the intermediate desire, the high and deep satisfaction of the conscious interchange of,
No, it's fine.
illumined fulfillment of the intermediate desire, the high and deep satisfaction of the conscious interchange of love by the unification of the state of the possessor and possessed in the divine unity of souls, which is the foundation of the supramental existence. If we scrutinize these terms carefully, we shall see that they are shapes and stages of the soul's seeking for the individual and universal delight of things. The ascent of life is in its nature the ascent of the divine delight in things from its dumb conception in matter through vicissitudes and opposites to its luminous consummation in spirit. He has summarized briefly what he has said about not the problem, but the ascent of life. So, if you remember, in the ascent of life, he has told you that we had that. I have to give you that chart. I'll give you that chart. The first status of life is matter. And there he is described dumb, inconscient drive or urge, a force of some involved will in the material or atomic existence, not free and possessor of itself or its works or their results, but entirely possessed by the universal movement in which it arises as the obscure, unformed seed of individuality. So, in fact, even one sentence, there are so many things to be discussed.
Yes.
So you have to go actually phrase by phrase. That's the whole thing. The first status of life is matter. Second status of life is life. Third status of life is mind. Fourth status is the supermind. And he says that whatever is there here in seed form slowly starts developing and reaches its fulfillment in the last stage. That's what he says. So he's summarizing whatever he said in the chapter Ascent of Life. The first status of life we found to be characterized by a dumb, inconscient drive or urge. So, the divine has involved himself in matter, and that's why, because he is divine, there is this dumb urge to get out of that prison house of matter. So that's a dumb urge. It can't formulate itself clearly. It doesn't know what it wants, but it wants to get out. That's why it is dumb. Dumb, inconscient drive or urge, a force of some involved will. The will is this adventure of consciousness. It wants to come down and go back to where it came from. Self-discovery is a will. He's talking of a will. Involved will in the material or atomic, not free and possessor of itself or its works or their results, but entirely possessed by the universal movement in which it arises as the obscure, unformed seed of individuality. Again, we'll go step by step because there in one sentence he has put in so much. The divine has involved itself here in this one, but it is divine, but it is not master. Matter is energy. Energy is master of the divine here in the physical world. It has completely imprisoned it. It is willingly done so. It is not that the divine is not subject to something else without his will. He says it's an adventure I am doing. I come down and plunge myself into it. I willingly submit myself to the opposite of myself, darkness. I plunge myself into darkness and I will escape. And that he does through each individual, goes back to where he came from. So, and it is the individual. That which is universal becomes the individual, and in matter it is the physical individual, the physical ego, because the atom is an individual. That individuality again has to become cosmic at the highest level. That's a game. The cosmic, the universal becomes the individual develops himself. After the higher mind, it becomes cosmic, and finally, at the highest level, you have both individuality as well as universality, both. So, but entirely possessed by the universal movement. So, if you want to put it in philosophical terms, Purusha, which is consciousness, agrees to imprison himself in matter, which is Prakriti, which is force. So, consciousness willingly submits itself to become the prisoner of force at the lower level. That's what he's saying. Okay? Now, if you look at the words, you will see that that's what he's saying. A dumb, inconscient drive or urge of this consciousness, a force of some involved will automatically gives you consciousness. So, it's an involved will in the material or atomic existence, not free and possessor of itself or its works or their results. So, it is so particular. Neither of itself, it is not even master of itself in matter, nor is it of its works, whatever work it wants to do, nor the results of what it wants to do. So, it is very, 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 he always puts in so much.
Yes.
Very accurate. Okay. Then, but entirely possessed by the universal movement. The word possessed is very, very a favorite word of Sridhar's. He always uses possessed. When you possess something, you are master of that thing. So, it is possessed, rather, matter is possessing the spirit, which is englobed there, encased in matter. So, and also he is saying the unformed seed of individuality. Because the individuality at that level is only physical ego. When it comes to life, which is the second one, it becomes a life ego. When it comes to the mind, it becomes a mental ego of which we are aware. Then you go beyond that, no ego. It disappears. The nature develops you fully as an individual, and when you are ready, it says, now you are a fully developed individual, now become cosmic. So the ego disappears and you enter into the cosmic consciousness. That's what he's saying. Now we come to the second. The root of the second. Now, did you notice that there is a metaphor there? First of all, he's saying the root, and then he talks of the bud, and then he talks of the fine flower. So it's a metaphor that is put in.
Beautiful.
Okay, so he says the root of the second status is desire, eager to possess but limited in capacity. This is the characteristic of life. Life is eager to possess, and desire is the main character in life, in the vital. Desire is the main ruling characteristic. But entirely, the root of the second status is desire, eager to possess, but limited in capacity. The bud of the third is love. This is at the mental level. At the mind, it becomes, you can see that chart, you will see that that's what it is. The third is a love, okay, which seeks both to possess and be possessed, to receive and to give itself. At the life level, according to the Darwinian theory also, there is only a struggle for existence and there is a wanting to dominate others. That's a characteristic of life. There is hardly any taking, there is hardly any giving. There is mostly a taking in life. But when it comes to mind, it wants to give and take, both. Cooperation has to be there. He uses the word cooperation in that chart. You will see. Cooperation and association. It wants to associate with others. Then, that's the third. The fine flower of the fourth in the supermind, its sign of perfection, we conceive as the pure and full emergence of the original will, the illumined fulfillment of the intermediate desire. Intermediate desire is life. Okay? So that becomes fully, what it desires gets fulfilled at the supramental level. That's what he says. The high and deep satisfaction of the conscious interchange of love by the unification of the state of the possessor and possessed in the divine unity of souls. This is a description of the cosmic consciousness where you are conscious of yourself, but you are also conscious that you are part of the whole. Everything else is a part of you. If you remember the apprehending consciousness and the comprehending consciousness. Okay, so the fine flower of the fourth is sign of perfection. I want you to notice one word. We conceive as the pure and full emergence. Who is this we? Sri Aurobindo's system. He always uses the word we in that sense. Okay, that means he doesn't say my integral yoga or my integral view. We conceive. It's not a general we. It's himself. Okay, so very rarely in Life Divine does he say I. Sometimes when he says I, it is only in one place very clearly, but in other places when he says I, it's only as an example. He is giving an example. Anybody could be that I. But I as Sri Aurobindo himself, hardly ever. It's always the we. Okay? So, the sign of perfection we conceive as the pure and full emergence of the original will. That which is a dumb urge now becomes fulfilled completely in the fourth status, that is the supermind. All this he has said already in the Ascent of Life chapter. The high and deep satisfaction of the conscious interchange of love by the unification of the state of the possessor and possessed in the divine unity of souls, which is the foundation of the supramental existence. In the supramental existence, in the last chapter, he has described where each person is an individual, yet he is in perfect harmony with everybody else. And he is also not only perfect harmony, but all are integrally one. So he is using the word here, state of the possessor and possessed in the divine unity of souls, which is the foundation of the supramental existence.
So the ego is gone up there.
Ego goes away immediately after you make your mind silent. The ego disappears. But a trace of the ego remains. The ego is a very complicated problem. It's not a simple problem. First of all, when you make your mind silent and go to the higher mind, you are in the self, you realize that you are not the doer. Nature is doing everything. Body is going on doing itself. But the sense of, oh, I am not doing anything, but this experience is coming to me, so I am the instrument of the divine. So the instrumental ego comes into the picture, which is a slightly subtler form of the ego. Finally, at the highest level, even there is a spiritual ego. You can call it an ego, it's not an ego. But who is experiencing this cosmic consciousness? Somebody is experiencing. That somebody is the true individual. So you could call that a spiritual ego. So it's a very complicated thing. If individuality, if you have to conceive of individuality, the idea of ego is very closely linked with that.
In Mother's prayers and meditations, very often you can read when she's saying the I is no more I, it has become thou.
Yes, yes.
So that is when there's total identification,
Yes.
and that I is not the individual outer,
Yes.
it's the inner.
In fact, in the agenda also, Mother
Yes.
goes on saying, I, and then she immediately corrects herself and saying, I mean this body. That's what she says.
Yeah, she's speaking of her body. Yes.
Yes. I mean this body which is existing in the, that's what I mean, because her consciousness has become vast and infinite.
But spiritual ego is usually used in a derogatory sense.
It depends on the context.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on the context. Sometimes, as you say, even the instrumental ego can be a spiritual ego. I am great, I have had the experience. So that also comes in. That also can be there. So, if we scrutinize these terms carefully, we shall see that they are shapes and stages of the soul's seeking for the individual and universal delight of things. The ascent of life is in its nature the ascent of the divine delight in things, from its dumb conception in matter through vicissitudes and opposites to its luminous consummation in spirit. So, in that, this whole para is a summation, and the last sentence is a super summation. It's interesting.
From the first to the
No,
fourth.
the last one is a super summation.
Yes. And so beautiful.
Yes. The ascent of life is nature, ascent of the divine delight in things from its dumb conception matter through vicissitudes and opposites. By the way, vicissitudes, the ups and downs of life. And the opposites are the dualities in the physical world. In the physical world, everything has a dual truth. Whatever you can think of, there's an equal and opposite thing which is equally valid. There's the dualities in the physical world. To its luminous consummation in spirit. Now, the word consummation also is a favorite one of Sri Aurobindo. He constantly keeps using that word. Consummation, successful completion of something.
So when Mother speaks of not taking her words as gospel, so to speak, then Sri Aurobindo has that great statement that only those things are true, the opposite of which are also true
Yes.
in their own time
Yes.
and application.
Yes.
It's incredible.
That's very interesting, because, in fact, since you mentioned that, in the record of yoga, Sri Aurobindo says, you must have the silence of the higher plane, but you must also have the strength and the activity of the lower plane. You have to combine the two. They are opposite, but you have to combine the two. In the record of yoga, a very stunning statement. You must have mastery. You must be full master of everything. You must also be the slave of the divine. So you have to combine both. You have to be the slave of the divine, and yet you have to be the master.
He says that again for humility also. Somebody asked him about humility, he says to the world, no. But to God, yes. You see, it's the same thing.
Yes.
The external world, no. But your humility has to be towards the Lord.
So, we go to the next para.
Yes.
The world being what it is, it could not be otherwise. For the world is a masked form of Satchidananda, and the nature of the consciousness of Satchidananda, and therefore the thing in which his force must always find and achieve itself, is divine bliss and omnipotent self-delight. Since life is an energy of his conscious force, the secret of all its movements must be a hidden delight inherent in all things, which is at once cause, motive, and object of its activities. And if by reason of egoistic division that delight is missed, if it is held back behind a veil, if it is represented as its own opposite, even as being is masked in death, consciousness figures as the inconscient and force mocks itself in the guise of incapacity. Then that which lives cannot be satisfied. That which lives cannot be satisfied, cannot either rest from the movement or fulfill the movement except by laying hold on this universal delight, which is at once the secret total delight of its own being and the original, all-encompassing, all-informing, all-upholding delight of the transcendent and immanent Satchidananda. To seek for delight is therefore the fundamental impulse and sense of life. To find and possess and fulfill it is its whole motive.
Very long sentence.
Again, each phrase, he goes on putting 3 things, 4 things at the same time. This is his style. So we go back to each sentence.
Mhm.
The world being what it is, it could not be otherwise.
Now that's a very important statement. Because
And he's explaining what he means.
Mother says the world is exactly as it should be.
Yes.
And we see all the opposite.
Yes, exactly. The world being what it is, it could not be otherwise. For the world is he's explaining, for the world is a masked form of Satchidananda. Satchidananda at the highest level, at the lowest level, it is Satchidananda masked. Light, darkness. Oneness, multiplicity. Formlessness, form. So everything is the opposite. And the nature of this is a very important concept in Advaita philosophy, that everything is one. There are no, in the physical world we see opposites, but they are really not opposites. And this has to be very firmly understood, because it's a big problem in daylight of existence, problem in solution also. It plays a large part. Light and darkness are not opposites. Light, when it reduces itself, becomes twilight, becomes semi-light, becomes very, very finally darkness. It's the same thing. Darkness is not the opposite of light, but the hiding of light, the capacity of hiding itself and lessening itself. So it's the same thing. Just like a high wind, okay? A storm. If it becomes less intense, it becomes a soft breeze. So there is no essential difference between a storm and a gentle breeze. One you think violent, and sometimes you will consider bad, and this you will consider very pleasant and nice. But there is no difference between the two. Essentially the same. The same concept is there in science also. Heat and cold. Cold does not exist by itself. There is no such thing as cold in science. It is heat which becomes less and less and less. Cold is the absence of heat. So the world is not an unreality. It is the hiding of the divine Satchidananda. So this is how you have to see. That's why the Advaita philosophy is so intense. There are many philosophies which say no, they are opposites. God has created all that is good, the devil has created all that is bad. Then there is Srivastava often refers to Manichaeanism. Mani was a mystic in Iran around 300 BC. And this was his theory, that everything that you see is good in the world is created by the divine. Everything that you see as bad is not created by him. He absolves the divine of all guilt. So, but then what sort of a God is he? He is not powerful. He is only half master of the world. So that's not a satisfactory solution at all. Advaita philosophy gets rid of this problem. Everything is the divine. Even everything, the worst possible thing you see here is the divine masked. So that is what completely changes the whole picture. There is nothing but the divine. So, because you spoke of that opposites, I said that. Okay. The world being what it is, it could not be otherwise. For the world is a masked form of Satchidananda, and the nature of the consciousness of Satchidananda, and therefore the thing in which his force must always find and achieve itself, is divine bliss, an omnipresent self-delight. So this bliss is omnipresent, everywhere it is there. You may see it or you may not see it. Since life is an energy of his conscious force, he has established that connection, the secret of all its movements must be, since life is an energy of his conscious force, the secret of all its movements must be a hidden delight inherent in all things, which is at once cause, motive, and object of its activities. And if by reason of egoistic division that delight is missed, if it is held back behind a veil, if it is represented as its own opposite, even as being is masked in death, consciousness figures as the inconscient, and force mocks itself in the guise of incapacity, then that which lives cannot be satisfied, cannot either rest from the movement or fulfill the movement, except by laying hold on this universal delight, which is at once the secret total delight of its own being and the original all-encompassing, all-informing, all-upholding delight of the transcendent and immanent Satchidananda. So delight is there everywhere, he says. At the highest level, this delight is the cause. What are the three things he is saying?
Cause, motive, and object of the activities.
Is at once cause, the motive and object of its activities. It is creating the activities because of delight, and it's also the motive, it is the object. And then finally he is saying the delight which is there at the highest level, he is giving three characteristics. All encompassing, it includes everything. All informing. The word informing, he uses the word informing very often, it goes into the form. That's what he means by informing. Don't think it is information normally. Informing means it goes into the form. So they use the word in that sense. Okay? All upholding. It also permits everything to remain in existence. It allows existence to remain. Why? Delight of the transcendent and immanent Satchidananda. So this delight of Satchidananda is all-encompassing, all-informing, all-upholding. And therefore in the physical world also you have Ananda, but masked. And if you will not, because it is masked, you will not have it. You cannot be master of yourself. Only when you become master of yourself, it reveals itself to you. To find and possess and fulfill it is its whole motive. So the whole motive of life, desire, it wants to possess. So it will possess when it goes to the supramental, not before that. We go to the next. Sometimes what he's saying in the para, we can read in slightly different words. It becomes slightly easier because he goes into great detail. So I'll do one thing. This particular para, I'll read in simpler words which I have put in. Okay, it may help. Sometimes it helps because his language is so all-inclusive that sometimes you get lost in the words. You lose the woods for the trees.
Yes. Very well said.
No, that's a phrase. No?
Yes.
You get lost in the details.
Can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah. So what he's saying is, the world is a masked form of Satchidananda, and its very nature is delight, Ananda. Therefore, life in all its motions must seek for this hidden delight which is inherent in itself. The world is the apparent opposite of Satchidananda. It seems to be unconscious, incapable, and weak, and full of pain and suffering. But behind all these seeming contraries, the full Satchidananda is ever present in subtle potency. Ananda is the cause, the motive, and the goal of all life's activities. Therefore, the impulse of life to seek and find is delight. This is what he says. I put it in my own words to make it simpler.
Good. When you say subtle,
Yeah.
subtle potencies,
At lower level it is subtle, no? It is not gross.
the Satchidananda.
Yeah, it has almost disappeared, no? That's why it is subtle. And potent. It is also potent. Potency is there. So, we go to the next para. Now, Srimad is asking, he's saying that everything is there in delight. But where the hell do you find the delight here? You see the opposite of delight in the physical world. So, but where in us is this principle of delight? Through what term of our being does it manifest and fulfill itself in the action of the cosmos as the principle of conscious force, and fulfill itself in the action of the cosmos as the principle of conscious force manifests and uses life for its cosmic term, and the principle of supermind manifests and uses mind. So, he is saying that conscious force becomes life and supermind becomes mind. So where is in the physical world, where do you find the corresponding lower term of Ananda? That's what he's asking. We have distinguished a fourfold principle of divine being, creative of the universe. Existence, conscious force, bliss and supermind. Existence is Sat, conscious force is Chit, Shakti, bliss is Ananda, and supermind is Vijnana. We'll come to that. Okay. So, creative of the universe. Existence, conscious force, bliss and supermind. Supermind, we have seen, is omnipresent in the material cosmos, but veiled. It is behind the actual phenomenon of things and occultly expresses itself there, but uses for effectuation its own subordinate term, mind. The divine conscious force is omnipresent in the material cosmos, but veiled, operative secretly behind the actual phenomenon of things, and it expresses itself there characteristically through its own subordinate term, life. And though we have not yet examined separately the principle of matter, yet we can already see that the divine all existence also is omnipresent in the material cosmos, but veiled, hidden behind the actual phenomenon of things, and manifests itself there initially through its own subordinate term, substance, form of being or matter. Then, equally, the principle of divine bliss must be omnipresent in the cosmos, veiled indeed, and possessing itself behind the actual phenomenon of things, but still manifested in us through some subordinate principle of its own, in which it is hidden and by which it must be found and achieved in the action of the universe. So, there must be something corresponding in the physical world to Ananda. What is that? He's asking. He's not yet saying clearly. So, he has just repeated what he said earlier. Supermind becomes mind. Chit Shakti, life conscious force becomes life. And matter, he said that we have not yet examined matter. That will be the next thing that we will examine. Matter is the expression in the physical world of Sat, existence. He uses the word existence because the word Sat means exactly that. Us, to be. The Sanskrit root is us. Us means to exist. And Sat is the present participle of existing, that way exists. So he uses the English word existence. But it means substance. In the physical world, if you look, what is that which is most existing? It's matter.
Matter.
So therefore, it's the subtlest form of matter is Sat, existence, which is, you can use other terms, you can say ether. It is something so subtle that you can say that almost there is nothing at all. In fact, some philosophers say there is no such thing as ether. Science also does not accept ether. It is non-existent. It is so subtle. But it is that subtle which becomes gross here. That's a connection. And now he's asking, what is the Ananda, what does it become here? So, that term is something in us which we sometimes call in a special sense the soul. That is to say, the psychic principle which is not the life or the mind, much less the body, but which holds in itself the opening and flowering of the essence of all these to their own peculiar delight of self, to light, to love, to joy and beauty, and to a refined purity of being. Refined purity of being. In fact, however, there is a double soul or psychic term in us, as every other cosmic principle in us is also double. We have two minds. One, the surface mind of our expressed evolutionary ego, the superficial mentality created by us in our emergence out of matter. Another, a subliminal mind, which is not hampered by our actual mental life and its strict limitations, something large, powerful, and luminous. The true mental being behind that superficial form of mental personality, we'll look at that word carefully, which we mistake for ourselves. So also, we have two lives. He means vital. One outer, involved in the physical body, bound by its past evolution in matter, which lives and was born and will die. The other, a subliminal force of life, which is not cabined between the narrow boundaries of our physical birth and death, but is our true vital being behind the form of living, which we ignorantly take for our real existence. Even in the matter of our being, there is a duality. When he is talking of being, he is talking of the body. The being is the body. There is the body. Far behind our body, we have a subtler material existence which provides the substance not only of our physical, but of our vital and mental sheaths, and is therefore our real substance supporting this physical form, which we erroneously imagine to be the whole body of our spirit. So too, we have a double psychic entity in us, the surface desire soul, which works in our vital cravings, our emotions, aesthetic faculty, and mental seeking for power, knowledge, and happiness, and a subliminal psychic entity, a pure power of light, love, joy, and refined essence of being, which is our true soul, behind the outer form of psychic existence, which we so often dignify by that name, by using the word soul. It is when some reflection of this larger and purer psychic entity comes to the surface that we say of a man, he has a soul. And when it is absent in his outer psychic life, we say of him, he has no soul, the psychic element. So now he has identified what Ananda becomes here in the physical world. It becomes a psychic being. And the psychic being, as he has told you, outer life, outer mind, inner mind. Outer life, inner life. Outer body, inner body. Similarly, behind all these inner subliminal, he also calls it the true mind, true vital, true physical. Behind them is the psychic being, deep in yourself. Mother has given a very interesting description of how to find the psychic being. She says it's like going deep into a well. You get the feeling that you're going deep into a well, and then you come out into light. So that's a psychic being that he's talking about. And all this is part of life because it is behind life, at the life level. If you go in horizontally, not up or down, first you have the outer vital. Then you go into the inner vital, which is the most dangerous region. That's the The intermediate zone, he calls it. There are a lot of all falsities and wrong things are there. You have to very, very carefully negotiate your way through that. And then you can go to the self, to the psychic.
Do the asuras reside there?
Pardon?
Asuras and Rakshasas?
They are in the life. They are in life, in the vital. They are neither there in matter nor in the mind. They are all in the vital. And that's why it's the most dangerous field. To cross that is a big, he calls that the intermediate zone. You should be very, very careful about that. There were several cases in the ashram, and one got lost like that, and another man, mother saved the person. He was getting all sorts of experiences. He went into intraconscious, he was getting vital experiences. But he told mother, he thought that he is having something wonderful. He told mother. But mother saw very clearly that it could be dangerous for him. She stopped the experiences. And when she stopped the experiences, this man started complaining. He used to tell us, mother has taken away all my experiences. Little realizing that she has saved him. So that is one interesting case. But another one was there who got stuck in that way. I spoke to you about last time.
Yes.
His name was Tirupati. It's there in the correspondence. It's nothing secret. And he refused to obey Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo told him, don't do what you're doing. Don't. He is claiming he doesn't sleep. He doesn't need to sleep. He doesn't need to eat. So Sri Aurobindo said, totally wrong. Please sleep normally and please eat normally. He refused. And disbalanced. Finally, he had to be sent away. So that's the most dangerous zone. The intermediate zone. Okay, so he has now told you what the corresponding. So now he has established fully the upper and the lower. He has not yet looked at matter. But matter he will look at 3-4 chapters after this. Okay, so supermind becomes mind at our level. Chit Shakti, conscious force becomes the vital. Ananda becomes the psychic being. And Sat becomes matter. The existence, subtle substance becomes a gross substance here. Now that he has established a connection, which he will do afterwards in matter, now he can claim that since there is a connection, a divine life on earth is possible, which the ascetics and all the others are refusing. The materialist doesn't even consider God to exist, so there is no question for him. But the ascetic who is experiencing the self, and he says that that's only reality, this is false, Sri Aurobindo denies that. All the Buddhists and the Mayavadins, they're all saying that. The world is all unreal and there's nothing to be done here. You have to reject it and go up. So if they're saying, no, this also is real, but masked reality. You can have a divine life here. You can clearly see that there's an evolution. So the next step of evolution will be the supramentalization of matter. We have time for one more para?
No, but we could go a little more into this para. We didn't do all of it.
Then we go back to the sentence. Oh, it's a very big one. All right, we'll go through. I'll read each sentence and we'll see whether it's clear. Okay, so that term is something, is that one? Yeah. That term is something in us which we sometimes call, in a special sense, the soul. That is to say, the psychic principle which is not the life or the mind, much less the body. Note interestingly, mind, life and body are what we call the outer being. It's what you think yourself to be normally. But the psychic is something other than that. That's what he's saying. That is to say, the psychic principle which is not the life or the mind, much less the body, but which holds in itself the opening and flowering of the essence of all these to their own peculiar delight of self, to light, to love, to joy and beauty, and to a refined purity of being. So whatever these joy, love, beauty and refined purity of being you get in the outer nature is all because of the psychic. The psychic development transfers all its powers and its characteristics to the outer life, outer nature. In fact, however, there is a double soul or psychic term in us, as every other cosmic principle in us is also double. So first it starts with the mind. For we have two minds. One, the surface mind of our expressed evolutionary ego. So the outer mind, the brain and its capacity to think what we think normally. That's our outer mind. And he's saying there's the ego also involved in it. Huh? He's saying, in fact, however, there's a double soul, and every other cosmic principle is reserved. For we have two minds, one the surface mind of our expressed evolutionary ego. Expressed evolutionary ego. It's a result of the evolution. You're coming from matter, first life is expressed, then finally matter is expressed. Then you have the ego there. The superficial mentality created by us in our emergence out of matter. There he is very clear. Another, a subliminal mind. Subliminal, the word subliminal usually says below the surface. But the word is used in Sri Aurobindo's is not below the surface but deep within. He uses it in that sense. The subliminal, he also uses the word intraconscient. He also uses the word the inner mind, inner vital, and the inner physical. Sometimes he uses true mind, true vital, true physical. That also he uses. So the subliminal, where are we? Yeah. We have two minds. The superficial mentality created by our emergence out of matter. Another subliminal mind, which is not hampered by our actual mental life and its strict limitations. Something large and powerful and luminous. The true mental being behind that superficial form of mental personality, which we mistake for ourselves. We think that we are the mind. In fact, Sri Aurobindo often uses this. First, the material man thinks that I am the body. Then there is the other, what is it called? Élan vital. Someone who thinks that backs over the one. The main part of man is the principle of life, not the body. Then comes Descartes, who says, no, I think, therefore I am. So that's the most important part of you. So this is all wrong. You are because you are soul, not body, mind, life. Okay, so that's what he is saying here, which you mistake for ourselves. In the positive force of which is not.
So also we have two lives.
We mistake for ourselves. So I wanted to just say one thing. Something large, powerful and luminous, true mental being behind. This true mental being, true vital being and true physical being, Sri Aurobindo also uses the word, because in Indian philosophy he uses the word Purusha. So there is a mental soul. There is a mental, vital soul. And there is a vital, physical soul. Sri Aurobindo also uses these words. Manomaya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Annamaya Purusha. The word soul, because these also, the soul takes all these different forms also. So one shouldn't get confused with the words, he means exactly the same thing. Inner mind, true mind, the mental Purusha, all meaning the same thing. The deep inside, which is 10 times more powerful than the ordinary mind. So,
but he makes a difference between the inner mind and the inmost mind in Letters on Yoga.
in the
In the Letters on Yoga, he makes a difference between the inner mind and the inmost mind.
inmost mind.
And it's the inmost mind which Dalal has called as Manomaya Purusha in his book Our Many Selves.
Dalal has called.
Yes.
Okay.
He made this ring of circles, so the concentric system. So the outer two is the outer mind and the inner mind. They comprise the Prakriti according to him. And the inner two circles is the inmost mind and the psychic being. They comprise the Purusha.
We can also imagine that, because suppose there is a gross mind, which is our normal mind, and there is a subtler mind, which is the inner mind. Why should it stop there? The principle can go on. It can be an inmost mind also. That's quite possible to imagine that. It becomes
You
subtler.
have the Chaitya Purusha, which is the psychic, and you have the Manomaya, Pranamaya, and so they probably are the inmost.
Yes.
And here when he talks about subliminal, maybe it is subliminal means the inmost.
No. Subliminal means inner.
Inner only. So there is a further movement.
Yeah. What the inmost would be is a little difficult. But if the psychic is active, it could even influence the mind.
Yes.
No? That which is the inner mind, it could even influence that if the psychic is active. So maybe some of these terms is not very easy for the mind to understand.
Yes.
And we make very rigid definitions and very rigid categorizations, but that's not always the right way. Nature is not so systematic and so organized as we think it is. It is all fluid, flowing one into the other. Even life and mind, we can't make out a distinction in our own self. No? What is a thought and what is an emotion? Sometimes we can't make out the difference. Okay, we go to the next sentence, which you may say for ourselves. So also, we have two lives. He uses the word life for vital. Okay, the vital being in you. The Indian word is prana. We have two lives. One outer, involved in the physical body, bound by its past evolution in matter, which lives and was born and will die. The other subliminal force of life, which is not cabined between the narrow boundaries of our physical birth and death, but is our true vital being behind the form of living, which we ignorantly take for our real existence. Now, this is a very interesting thing. The outer vital, after death, disappears. So, if they are using the word cabined, or how you pronounce it? Cabined between the narrow boundaries of our physical birth and death. But the true vital does not dissolve. That's why he is implying that here. So the true vital is carried over, the intraconscious carries over the true vital. Part of it is carried over.
We haven't seen that elsewhere in Sri Aurobindo's, right? That's very interesting. That the true vital does not disappear.
Yes. That it remains inside. It's very interesting because even the physical, okay, I'll point out something which you'll think about it. Sometimes when a person is reborn, okay, even the physical traits appear in the next life. So there is even the subtle physical, there is a carryover to the next life.
Probably those elements that have been immortalized in his previous life can come. It's like the physical hands of a pianist, they after his death, that kind of stays in the atmosphere, and when he takes another birth, if he decides to be a pianist, it comes down or into somebody else.
I have just recently seen one, I have forgotten the exact name, but it's on the internet, 15-minute interview with a doctor who is describing a girl who, I have forgotten the exact, but I remember Shanta and Kanta. That is the only thing I remember. I don't remember the name of the doctor. It's a 15-minute video, reincarnation theory, where one child is born in a family and from the beginning she is having difficulty in breathing. And in fact, the breathing was so difficult that they thought that she will not survive. But she survived. Okay? And finally they found out, and she's going on talking about a past life. I was something and I had a house, this, that. Finally they managed to find that house and the person who had, and they found out the secret was that she had been drowned in a well. And that drowning in the well was appearing in this difficulty of breathing here. Even sometimes if these birthmarks which are there, they are carry over, physical marks get carried over to the next life. So if the inmost mind, what he's talking about, and the inner vital doesn't disappear, the subtle physical also sometimes gets expressed in the next life. It's an interesting thing.
So when they chose the Dalai Lama from a young boy.
Yes. That also, they use that principle.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the next sentence. So, take our, even in the matter of our being, there is this duality. Now, very clearly using the word being here in the sense of substance, of body. He is meaning body. Even in because he has dealt with mind and he has dealt with vital, now he is talking of the body. Our being, there is a duality. For behind our body, we have a subtler material existence which provides a substance not only of our physical but of our vital and mental sheaths, and is therefore our real substance supporting this physical form, which we erroneously imagine to be the whole body of our spirit. So too, we have a double psychic entity in us. The surface desire soul. So you have to use the word desire soul. He used the word soul for the vital because in the past sometimes the vital is to be mistaken for the soul. in a very loose sense, they used to use the word. Even now, in English, when you use the word psychic, you don't mean psychic in the Sri Aurobindonian sense. You mean in a psychological sense. The word psychic is used in that sense. So, so we have a double psychic entity in us, the surface desire soul, which works in our vital cravings, our emotions, aesthetic faculty, and mental seeking for power, knowledge, and happiness. And a subliminal, the inner one, psychic entity, a pure power of light, love, joy, and refined essence of being, which is our true soul behind the outer form of psychic existence, which, sorry,
which
he
we
would have
so-
added which, but we so often dignify by that name. It is when some reflection of this larger and purer psychic entity comes to the surface that we say of a man, he has a soul. And when it is absent in his outer psychic life, now the word psychic life here is used in the psychological sense, okay? That we say of him, he has no soul. The second time he uses the word psychic, very clearly it is psychological, okay? The outward psychic life. That completes the
Wonderful.
paragraph. After this chapter, he has finished with life. He has finished with mind, he has finished with life, he goes on to matter. And there are some difficult chapters there in life. Matter is quite difficult.
Thank you, Ranga.